They had spent 12,000 cycles studying fear. They were the oldest horror experts in the known universe, and their archives contained terrors that could break minds across 7 galaxies. They had documented the death screams of dying civilizations. They had recorded the parasitic nightmares of the blind moons. They had witnessed the reality-warping horrors that drove the crystalline minds to extinction. In all that time, they had never found a species quite like humanity. Senior researcher Al stood before the observation screens in the primary study chamber, watching the blue and green planet rotate slowly in the darkness. Behind her, a dozen junior researchers worked at their stations, their crystalline bodies humming with quiet energy as they processed data from thousands of monitoring devices hidden throughout human civilization. "Run the sleep analysis again," Al said. Her voice carried the weight of someone who had seen too much and understood too little about what she was currently witnessing. Junior researcher looked up from her station. "Senior, I have run it 47 times. The results remain consistent." "Then explain them to me once more." Chromatic display shifted through shades of academic frustration, but she pulled up a holographic representation of a human brain, highlighting the areas that activated during what humans called REM sleep. The humans enter a state of prolonged unconsciousness for approximately 1/3 of their existence, began. During this state, their brains generate vivid internal experiences. They call these experiences dreams. "Other species dream," Al said. "They have dream states. The hunched ones of Sector 9 enter trance visions." "Yes, Senior, but human dreams are different. Observe." Manipulated the hologram and the brain activity patterns changed. Stress hormones flooded the simulated system. Heart rate increased. The amygdala, the human fear center, lit up like a small sun. Approximately 30% of remembered human dreams are what they classify as nightmares. Their minds create scenarios of terror, helplessness, and death. They dream of being chased by predators. They dream of falling from great heights. They dream of their loved ones dying. They dream of their own bodies transforming into something wrong. Al leaned closer to the display. "And this damages them. Their psychological cohesion degrades over time." "No, Senior, that is what I have been trying to explain. It does not damage them. They wake up, acknowledge the nightmare, and continue their day. Many of them forget the nightmare within minutes. Those who remember it often tell others about it, sometimes for entertainment." The observation chamber fell silent. Several junior researchers had stopped their work to listen. "Entertainment," Al repeated. "Yes, Senior. I have recorded hundreds of instances of humans sharing their nightmares with others. They laugh about them. They analyze them. They compare them to the nightmares of their companions. They have created an entire field of study called dream interpretation, where they attempt to find meaning in their nocturnal terrors." Al turned back to the observation screens. On one monitor, a human child slept peacefully in a small bed. On another, an adult human tossed and turned, clearly in the grip of some internal horror. On a third, an elderly human sat up suddenly, breathing hard, then reached for a glass of water and a small notebook beside the bed. "What is the elderly one doing?" Al asked. "Recording the nightmare, Senior. Many humans keep what they call dream journals. They write down their nightmares so they will not forget them." "Why would they want to remember something terrifying?" Chromatic display shifted to the color of intellectual uncertainty. "I do not fully understand yet, Senior, but I believe it connects to another aspect of human civilization that we have been monitoring." She changed the main display to show a different set of data. Images flowed across the screen, thousands of them, all created by human hands and minds. Paintings of monsters, sculptures of twisted figures, digital renderings of impossible nightmares given visual form. "They create art from their terrors," said. "Not just occasionally, but constantly. They have entire industries dedicated to what they call horror. Books, films, paintings, games, music. They package fear and sell it to each other. Al studied the images. A creature with too many teeth and not enough eyes. A forest where the trees had faces twisted in silent screams. A child's toy with blood running from its button eyes. A house that seemed to fold in on itself in impossible ways. "These are their nightmares made visible," she said. "Yes, Senior, and other humans pay to experience them. They gather in large groups to watch horror films together. They read horror stories before sleep. They play games designed specifically to frighten them." Why? The question hung in the air. None of the researchers could answer it. In 12,000 cycles of studying fear, they had learned one fundamental truth. Fear was entropy. It was the slow degradation of psychological cohesion. Every species they had studied eventually broke under enough exposure to horror. The crystalline minds had shattered into fragments of screaming light. The thousand-voiced had gone silent one by one, their communal consciousness unable to process the horrors they had witnessed. The great civilization of the hollow stars had simply stopped, their entire population falling into catatonic states from which they never recovered. Fear destroyed, that was the universal constant. But these humans seemed to be operating under different rules. "Expand our monitoring," Al ordered. "I want to understand how deep this goes. Focus on their creative industries. Find me the individuals who specialize in transforming nightmares into art. Learn their processes. Document everything." "Yes, Senior. I have already identified several subjects of particular interest." Brought up a profile on the main screen. A human male, middle-aged by their species standards, with paint stains on his hands and dark circles under his eyes. This one is called. He is what humans term a surrealist horror artist. His work sells for substantial amounts of their currency. Other humans consider him a master of his craft. The screen displayed some of his paintings. A figure drowning in a sea of reaching hands. A mirror that showed a reflection with too many faces layered on top of each other. A childhood bedroom where the shadows had begun to peel away from the walls and take solid form. "I have been monitoring his sleep patterns," continued. "He experiences intense nightmare activity almost every night. By our standards, he should be psychologically shattered. His stress hormones reach levels we associate with severe trauma. His heart rate spikes repeatedly throughout the sleep cycle. His brain generates images of such disturbing nature that I have had to restrict access to the raw feeds." "And yet he creates art," Al said. "He wakes each morning and paints what he saw in his nightmares. Then other humans purchase these paintings and hang them in their living spaces. They look at his externalized nightmares every day by choice." Al was quiet for a long time. The observation chamber hummed with the soft sounds of processing equipment and monitoring devices. On the screens, humanity went about its daily existence, billions of individuals moving through a world that would generate new nightmares for them that very night. "I am going to make a preliminary report to the horror archives," Al finally said. "I want all of you to understand the significance of what we are observing here." The junior researchers straightened at their stations, giving her their full attention. "In 12,000 cycles, we have never found a species that processes fear the way these humans do. Every other civilization has been diminished by exposure to terror. Every other species has hidden from their nightmares, suppressed them, tried to forget them. The ones that failed to hide eventually broke." She gestured at the screens, at the blue and green planets still rotating in the darkness. "These humans do not hide from their nightmares. They do not suppress them. They do not try to forget. Instead, they wake each morning and deliberately remember what terrified them. They share their nightmares with others. They transform them into art and stories and songs. They have built entire cultural institutions around the processing of fear." Al turned to face her research team directly. "I do not yet understand what this means, but I suspect we are witnessing something unprecedented. something that may change everything we thought we knew about the relationship between intelligent species and the horrors of existence. She paused, her crystalline body flickering with colors that had no name in the emotional spectrum. Continue monitoring, learn everything you can, and proceed with extreme caution, because I am beginning to suspect that when it comes to fear, humanity may be the most dangerous species we have ever encountered. The research team returned to their work. On the screens, night was falling across one side of the human planet. Billions of humans were preparing for sleep, unaware that they were being watched, unaware that their nightly terrors had drawn the attention of the oldest horror experts in the universe. And somewhere in a small studio apartment was cleaning his brushes and preparing for bed, knowing that tonight his mind would take him to dark places, and knowing that tomorrow he would bring something back from those places. Something beautiful, something terrible, something uniquely, impossibly human. 6 cycles into the observation, made the discovery that would change everything the thought they knew about fear and intelligence, and the strange species called humanity. She had been assigned to monitor full-time. The human artist had become the primary subject of their study and spent her days watching his every action, analyzing his brain patterns, documenting the relationship between his nightmares and his art. At first, the data seemed to confirm their initial observations. Experienced intense nightmares almost every night. His mind generated scenarios of terror that would have broken members of most species. He dreamed of being chased through endless corridors by things he could not see. He dreamed of looking in mirrors and watching his face become unfamiliar. He dreamed of his hands moving without his control, creating things he did not want to create. And every morning, he woke up and painted, but began to notice patterns that did not fit neatly into their existing understanding of fear. The relationship between the nightmares and the art was not what she had expected. One particular morning, she watched wake from an especially intense nightmare. His monitoring data showed that he had spent nearly an hour in a dream state that involved the sensation of his own identity dissolving, of his sense of self becoming scattered across multiple bodies that did not belong to him. He sat up in bed, breathing hard, sweat soaking through his sleep clothes. He reached for his nightmare journal and wrote furiously for several minutes. Then he got up, made coffee, and walked to his studio. Watched him stand in front of a blank canvas for almost an hour. He did not touch a brush. He simply stood there, staring at the white space, his brain activity showing unusual patterns of integration and synthesis. Then he began to paint. What emerged over the next several days was not a direct representation of the nightmare. It was something else entirely. He had taken the raw emotional content of the experience, the terrifying sensation of identity loss, and transformed it into an image that communicated something beyond simple fear. The painting showed a figure standing at the center of a room filled with mirrors. Each mirror reflected a different version of the figure, but none of them matched. The colors he used were wrong, somehow, reds that seemed to shift toward purple when you looked at them too long, blues that contained hints of something your mind could not quite process. Other humans who viewed the painting reported feeling disturbed, yes, but also something else. They used words like profound and moving and beautiful. They said the painting made them think about their own sense of self, about the fragile nature of identity, about the way we construct ourselves from fragments and reflections. Compiled her findings and requested a meeting with Al. The nightmares are not the end product, explained, displaying her data on the chamber's main screen. They are raw material. The human brain generates terror during sleep, but the conscious mind then processes that terror into something new. Art now said, more than art, senior, meaning. The nightmares provide the emotional intensity, the visceral impact, but the waking mind provides context, interpretation, purpose. The human is not simply reproducing his nightmares. He is refining them, transforming them, turning raw fear into something that communicates to other humans on a level beyond simple terror. Al studied the painting for a long time. I do not understand why other humans would want to experience this. I think I am beginning to understand, said. Her chromatic display shifted through colors of academic excitement, a rare emotional state for a researcher. The humans have a concept they call catharsis. It means experiencing negative emotions in a controlled context in order to process and release them. Explain. When a human looks at this painting, they experience a controlled version of the fear that experienced in his nightmare. But because they are awake, because they are in a safe environment, because they know the fear is artificial, they can process it without being damaged by it. They can examine the fear, understand it, and ultimately move past it. Brought up additional data, showing brain scans of humans experiencing horror media. I have been monitoring test subjects who consume what humans call horror content. Films designed to frighten them, stories written to disturb them, art created to unsettle them. And I have noticed something remarkable. The brain scans displayed side by side, showing activity patterns before and after horror media consumption. After exposure to controlled fear experiences, human stress hormones actually decrease. Their baseline anxiety levels drop. They report feeling calmer, more settled, more capable of handling real-world stressors. Al's crystalline body flickered with colors of deep consideration. They are training themselves. Yes, Senior. I believe that is exactly what they are doing. The nightmares provide raw exposure to worst-case scenarios. The art provides processed, meaningful frameworks for understanding those scenarios. And the voluntary consumption of horror content provides repeated practice in facing fear and surviving it. The entire species is engaged in ongoing fear resistance training. On a scale we have never observed before. Billions of individuals, every night, facing simulated horrors in their sleep, then waking and sharing those experiences with each other, transforming them into cultural products that allow the entire species to collectively process and integrate the experience of terror. Paused, her display cycling through colors that suggested she was about to say something significant. Senior, I believe I now understand why humanity has not broken the way other species have. They do not experience fear as a threat to be avoided. They experience it as a resource to be harvested. The observation chamber fell silent. On the screens, continued working on his painting, adding details that made the mirrors seem to reach toward the central figure with something like hunger. Every civilization we have studied has treated fear as an enemy, Al said slowly. Something to be fought, fled from, suppressed. When they failed to escape it, they were destroyed by it. The humans have taken a different approach, confirmed. They have domesticated fear. They have turned it into fuel for their creative and psychological processes. Instead of running from the darkness, they have made the darkness into raw material for their art. The implications of this are significant. More than significant, Senior. If our models are correct, this means humanity may be the first species capable of surviving prolonged exposure to the true horrors of the universe. Not because they are braver than other species, not because they are stronger or more resilient, but because they have developed a fundamentally different relationship with terror itself. Al turned back to the observation screens. Night was falling again on part of the human planet. Billions of humans were preparing for sleep, preparing to enter that strange, vulnerable state where their minds would generate nightmares. But now she understood that vulnerable was the wrong word. The humans were not vulnerable during sleep. They were working, processing, training. Every nightmare was a lesson, every terror a teacher. Continue your research, Al said. I want to understand the full scope of what we are observing, and I want you to begin documenting the broader cultural implications. How does this fear processing affect their other behaviors, their social structures, their approach to actual dangers in their environment? Yes, Senior. I have already begun preliminary analysis of their risk-taking behaviors and their approaches to real-world threats. And excellent work. This may be the most important discovery our species has made since we first began studying horror. His display flickered with pride, but she remained focused on her work. On her screen had finished painting for the day. He was cleaning his brushes, preparing to sleep, preparing to dream. Tomorrow he would wake with new nightmares. And tomorrow he would transform those nightmares into something that other humans would call beautiful. They had 12,000 cycles of experience studying fear. They had witnessed the destruction of civilizations, the shattering of minds, the slow entropy of species ground down by terror. But they had never seen anything like this. They had never encountered a species that looked at fear and saw raw material instead of destruction, and was beginning to suspect that this discovery would change more than just their understanding of humanity. It might change everything the thought they knew about survival itself. The final report took 3 cycles to compile. Al worked on it personally, reviewing every piece of data her team had gathered, integrating findings from hundreds of human subjects, building a comprehensive analysis of something that they had never encountered in 12,000 cycles of studying horror. She presented her findings to the full Horror Archives Assembly, the first time such a presentation had been called in over 1,000 cycles. "Distinguished colleagues," she began, her crystalline form projecting patterns of formal academic gravity. "What I am about to share with you will require a fundamental revision of our understanding of fear and its relationship to intelligent life." The assembly chamber fell silent. Hundreds of researchers watched as Al activated the main display, showing the blue and green planet that had been the focus of such intense study. For 12,000 cycles, we have operated under a basic assumption. Fear is entropy. Exposure to sufficient terror inevitably degrades psychological cohesion. Given enough time and enough horror, every species breaks. She displayed images from their archives, the shattered remnants of the crystalline minds, the silent, empty worlds of the thousand-voiced, the catatonic populations of the hollow stars civilization. We have witnessed this pattern across 7 galaxies. We have documented it in species of vastly different biologies, psychologies, and cultural structures. Fear destroys. That has been our universal constant. She paused, letting the weight of 12,000 cycles of evidence settle over the assembly. The species called humanity has proven this constant wrong. The main display changed to show human brain scans during REM sleep, nightmare journals, horror art, and data visualizations of human psychological resilience. Humans generate their own nightmares. Their minds create scenarios of terror during sleep, exposing them to simulated horrors on a nightly basis. But instead of being degraded by this exposure, they are strengthened by it. She walked the assembly through the evidence. The nightmare to art pipeline, the cultural infrastructure of horror media, the collective processing of fear through shared stories and images, the cathartic function of voluntary terror exposure. They have developed a fundamentally different relationship with fear than any species we have previously studied. Where other civilizations have tried to hide from their nightmares, humans have turned nightmares into training exercises. Where other species have suppressed their terrors, humans have transformed them into art. Where other civilizations have been destroyed by prolonged exposure to horror, humans have used that exposure to build psychological immunity. She displayed data from her team's analysis of human risk-taking behavior. Humans who regularly consume horror media show increased resilience when facing actual threats. They demonstrate better stress management, faster recovery from traumatic experiences, and greater willingness to confront dangerous situations when necessary. Their nightly nightmares and their cultural horror traditions are not weaknesses. They are training systems. The assembly was absolutely silent. Al could see the colors of confusion, disbelief, and slowly dawning understanding flickering across her colleagues' crystalline forms. But the most significant finding is not about individual psychology, she continued. It is about collective behavior. She displayed visualizations of human horror media consumption patterns, showing how nightmares flowed from individual dreamers into art, from art into cultural products, from cultural products into mass consumption, and from mass consumption back into the collective unconscious of the entire species. Humans share their nightmares. They compare them, analyze them, rank them, debate their meanings. They have created industries dedicated to refining and distributing fear experiences. They have developed critics who evaluate horror content for quality and effectiveness. They have scholars who study the history and evolution of fear in their art. She paused, ensuring she had the full attention of every researcher in the chamber. What this means is that humanity is not merely processing fear on an individual level. They are processing it collectively, across their entire species. When one human has a nightmare and transforms it into art, other humans can experience a processed version of that nightmare. They can learn from it, integrate it, build upon it. The nightmares of each individual become resources for the entire civilization. Al brought up her final slide, a single statement against a dark background. Humanity has domesticated fear. The words hung in the air of the assembly chamber. They have taken the force that has destroyed every other civilization we have studied, and they have turned it into a renewable resource. They harvest terror the way other species harvest energy. They refine it, store it, distribute it, and use it to strengthen themselves against the horrors of existence. She turned to face the assembly directly. Distinguished colleagues, the implications of this discovery extend far beyond academic interest. For 12,000 cycles, we have believed that the universe's horrors would eventually destroy any civilization that encountered them. We have watched species after species fall to the entropy of fear. We have assumed that this fate was inevitable, that it was simply a matter of time before any intelligent species was ground down by terror. Her chromatic display shifted to colors of profound significance. Humanity suggests another possibility. If fear can be processed rather than suppressed, if nightmares can be transformed rather than hidden from, if terror can be made into fuel rather than poison, then survival may be possible. True survival, not the temporary resistance of species that simply have not yet encountered enough horror, but genuine, sustainable survival in a universe filled with terrors. Al paused, gathering herself for her conclusion. My recommendation to this assembly is as follows. We must study humanity further. We must understand every aspect of their fear processing capabilities. We must learn how they transform nightmares into art, how they share terror without being destroyed by it, how they have built a civilization that draws strength from the very force that has shattered every other intelligent species we have encountered. She displayed one final image on the main screen. Standing in his studio, putting the finishing touches on a painting that showed a figure emerging from darkness, carrying something bright and terrible in their hands. This human has turned his nightmares into beauty. His species has turned fear into fuel. And if we can learn how they do it, we may finally be able to answer the question that has haunted our civilization since we first began studying horror. She let the silence stretch for a moment. Is it possible to survive in a universe this terrible? For 12,000 cycles, we believed the answer was no. Humanity suggests the answer might be yes, but only if you are willing to face your nightmares instead of running from them. Only if you are willing to make art from your terrors. Only if you are willing to do what humans have done. She gestured at the image of. Only if you are willing to wake each morning and bring something back from the darkness. The assembly remained silent for a long time after Al finished her presentation. Finally, the eldest member of the Horror Archives, a researcher who had witnessed the fall of the crystalline minds, spoke. What is your recommendation for contact? Al had been expecting this question. She had spent considerable time considering it. "Extreme caution," she said. "Humanity has achieved something unprecedented. They have mastered fear itself, but that mastery comes with implications we do not fully understand." She brought up new data on the main display. Human horror art is not merely therapeutic. It is also creative. They are not just processing existing fears. They are generating new ones. Their nightmares evolve, become more complex, more terrible, more sophisticated. And they share these evolved nightmares with each other, building on each other's work, creating terrors that no individual human could have imagined alone. The display showed the evolution of human horror imagery over time, from simple monsters to complex psychological terrors, from basic fears to intricate nightmares that explored the deepest vulnerabilities of consciousness itself. They are not just surviving fear. They are developing it, refining it, improving it. Each generation of humans has access to more sophisticated nightmares than the last, and each generation processes those nightmares and creates even more sophisticated ones for the next. Al's display flickered with colors that had no name. We do not know what they are building toward. We do not know what kind of fear they will eventually be capable of generating and processing. We only know that they are on a trajectory that no other species has ever achieved. She turned back to face the assembly. "My recommendation is that we observe, learn, document, but approach with the understanding that we are watching something genuinely new in the universe. A species that has turned nightmares into fuel and is using that fuel to build something we cannot yet imagine." The eldest researcher considered this for a long moment. "And if they notice us watching?" Al thought of painting his nightmares into something beautiful and terrible. She thought of the billions of humans dreaming every night, processing every morning, creating every day. She thought of what a species like that might do if they encountered a real horror, something from outside their planet, something watching them from the darkness. "Then I suspect," she said slowly, "that we will become part of their art, another nightmare to process, another fear to transform, another darkness to bring back light from." She paused. "And I am genuinely uncertain whether that should frighten us or give us hope." The assembly had no answer to that. None of them did. On the observation screens, night was falling once again on the human planet. Billions of humans were preparing for sleep, preparing to dream, preparing to face the terrors their own minds would create for them. And somewhere in his small studio apartment had finished another painting. This one showed figures in the darkness, watching, crystalline shapes with colors that flickered in patterns that might have been emotions, watchers from beyond the world, studying humanity from the shadows. He did not know where the image had come from. It had simply appeared in his nightmare the night before, and he had felt compelled to paint it. He looked at the finished work for a long time, then he smiled. It was beautiful, it was terrible, it was human. And somewhere in the darkness, the watched him watching them, and wondered what kind of species could turn even their observation into art. The answer, of course, was simple. The kind of species that had learned to make fuel from fear. The kind of species that had domesticated nightmares. The kind of species that woke each morning and brought something back from the darkness. The kind of species called human.